Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are, tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favourite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath, let your shoulders drop, maybe pull the covers up a bit higher, and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. Ashcombe Hall was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant Art Deco lines, polished marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. Every weekend, guests playing their refined role in the weekend house party. Then Sir Reginald Ashcombe was found dead in the library. Cyanide in his after-dinner brandy, the glass still warm in his stiffening hand. A torn photograph lay beside him, one half missing, and the jagged edge like a scream frozen in paper. Police saw a simple suicide, business troubles, a man broken by failure. But Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this theatre of wealth and old blood was playing the role of innocent. The role of grieving family. The role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The grand library of Ashcombe Hall carried the rich scent of old leather books, fresh hothouse lilies in tall crystal vases, and the lingering aroma of fine Cuban cigars. Polished mahogany shelves rose elegantly toward the high ceiling, their surfaces gleaming with fresh wax. Heavy velvet curtains framed the tall windows that overlooked a cold stone terrace still touched with morning frost. Sir Reginald Ashcombe lay slumped in his deep leather armchair, one hand frozen around the empty brandy glass. His face showed the twisted agony of cyanide, eyes wide in final surprise. Beside him on the small table rested half a torn photograph. Reginald himself, much younger, arm in arm, with a woman whose face had been violently ripped away. The weekend house party, meant to celebrate his latest business venture, had instead become the stage for murder. Hercule Poirot arrived by the afternoon train, his patent leather shoes clicking sharply on the parquet floor of the entrance hall. He carried his small valise neatly and paused to smooth an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The warm drawing-room air, scented with expensive perfume and strong continental coffee, greeted him as he entered. Outside, the chill night air pressed against the windows. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, though he travelled alone this time, "this is no ordinary stage. Observe the deliberate breaking of symmetry." He tilted his egg-shaped head, green eyes gleaming as he studied the torn photograph. Someone has torn away a piece of the past, but the little grey cells, they do not tear so easily. The family and guests had gathered in the drawing-room. The space breathed 1930s Art Deco elegance, silk evening gowns rustling softly, the distant notes of a piano playing something melancholy, and the gentle tinkle of crystal chandeliers overhead. The fire crackled warmly in the grate, sending faint wood smoke curling upward. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, the widow, stood tall in flowing black silk that whispered against the carpet. Her perfume, rich and floral from Worth, hung heavy in the warm room. She dabbed at her eyes with a crisp linen handkerchief. "It must have been suicide," she said, her voice perfectly controlled. Reginald had been under terrible strain. Watch this performance carefully. Is it truth or theatre? The shoulders shake at the right moments, yet the handkerchief stays suspiciously dry. Where are the tears? Beside her stood their son, Derek Ashcombe, 32 and handsome in rough tweed. His hands trembled slightly as he accepted hot coffee from the maid. The strong aroma rose between them. "Father was impossible these last months," Derek muttered. always shouting about money and secrets, but suicide! He was too proud. Observe the hands, you who watch with Poirot. They tremble, yes. But is it grief, or something sharper? Fear performing as sorrow? Next came Miss Violet Harrington, Sir Reginald's young secretary. Pretty and modest in simple silk, she twisted her soft kid gloves nervously in her lap. A faint trace of sandalwood cologne clung to her. "I typed his letters until late," she whispered. "He seemed distracted. He even mentioned wanting a certain photograph destroyed." Ah, the helpful secretary, so eager with details. But notice how her eyes slide away from the torn photograph whenever it is mentioned. The mask of innocence is almost convincing. The final player was Mr. Julian Blake, Reginald's sleek business partner. He swirled a glass of dry champagne, bubbles catching the chandelier light. His cologne was sharp and masculine. "Reginald and I had our differences, but this is tragic, simply tragic." His shock sounded smooth, almost too polished. Poirot arranged a silver cigarette case, crystal ashtray, and fresh lily symmetrically on a side table before speaking. "Mesdames et messieurs, the stage is set. Sir Reginald left us a most intriguing prop, this torn photograph. Someone removed the other half. Why? Because the face it showed threatened their carefully rehearsed role in this drama." Lady Eleanor stiffened, her silk gown rustling. Derek looked toward the cold terrace. Violet's gloves twisted tighter. Julian took another sip of champagne, the earlier pop of the cork now feeling like false celebration. Inspector Japp had examined the body. "Cyanide in the brandy," he reported. "The glass was his own, fingerprints only his. Business troubles, debts mounting. Looks like suicide to me, Poirot." Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. "Mais non, my dear chap. Suicide does not tear photographs in half and then die so conveniently. This is murder performed on stage, and the murderer still acts among us." The fire crackled, sending pleasant warmth into the room, while rain began to patter softly against the windows. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed the hour with solemn tones. Silk rustled as someone shifted uncomfortably. The faint smell of leather bindings and fresh flowers mixed with the rich coffee. Poirot drew himself up to his full height, still small but commanding. "Hercule Poirot has been called to direct this production. I tell you, the performance of innocence will not last. Someone here forgot their lines the moment that photograph was torn." The cast shifted. Crystal chandeliers tinkled overhead. A door closed softly somewhere in the distance. The tension in the warm drawing room rose like the curtain on a new act. Someone among them was playing their role too perfectly. Truth does not rehearse. Lies flow smooth until the mask slips. Chapter 2. Enter the players formal. Interviews began the next morning in the sunlit morning room. Pale silk walls glowed softly, and polished mahogany furniture reflected weak winter light. The air carried the comforting smell of strong continental coffee and fresh hothouse lilies arranged that morning. Poirot sat at a small table, arranging his notes with precise symmetry. First scene, Lady Eleanor Ashcombe. She entered in fresh black silk that flowed like liquid night, the fabric rustling gently. Her expensive Worth perfume preceded her into the warm room. She took the chair with graceful poise, crossing her legs so the silk whispered against the crisp linen napkin she held. "The performance?" Poirot noted silently. "She sits composed, the perfect picture of dignified widowhood. Hands folded neatly, eyes downcast at exactly the right moments, the tell. Yet when she speaks of her husband, her fingers tighten too firmly on the napkin. Grief does not grip with such controlled force. Resentment does. She spoke smoothly. Reginald had been impossible lately, always accusing everyone of betrayal. He even threatened to change his will only days ago. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. And you, madame, performed the role of supportive wife perfectly. Yet the servants heard raised voices 2 nights ago, loud enough to echo through the corridors. Lady Eleanor's mask held steady. Arguments happen in every marriage, Monsieur Poirot. That proves nothing. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. Notice how she never mentions the torn photograph unless forced. Ask yourself, why does a new widow avoid wondering about the image found beside her dead husband? Second scene. Derek Ashcombe. The young man entered smelling of rough tweed and faint wood smoke from an early walk on the cold terrace. His hands were steadier now, but his eyes still darted nervously. He claimed he had been in the billiard room until midnight, then went straight to bed. Father was alive when I last saw him. We argued about money, yes, but I would never harm him. The performance. He plays the dutiful yet strained son convincingly. The slight hesitation before denying any violent capability feels almost natural. The tell. Yet when asked about the photograph, he reached too quickly for his cigarette case. The hands moved with surprising steadiness. A man truly shocked does not reach so smoothly. Derek admitted the family finances were strained. Father invested badly. Blake pushed him into risky schemes that were failing. Poirot smoothed his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. And you, Monsieur Derek, you stand to inherit a great deal, if certain secrets remain buried. Third scene. Violet Harrington. The secretary arrived in a modest but well-cut silk dress. She had removed her kid gloves, revealing delicate hands that still trembled slightly. A faint sandalwood cologne clung to her skin. She spoke softly, eyes lowered. I admired Sir Reginald greatly. He was brilliant, though difficult. That photograph. He asked me to find it 2 days ago. He said it was from his past and could ruin everything if it surfaced. Her performance was gentle and fragile. The voice trembled at precisely the right moments. But Poirot observed how her gaze flicked too quickly toward the library door whenever the torn photograph was mentioned. Too rehearsed, too eager to appear helpful. Fourth scene. Julian Blake. The business partner entered with confidence, his sharp masculine cologne cutting through the coffee aroma. He accepted a cup of hot coffee and sipped it black and strong. Reginald and I were partners for 15 years. I tried to warn him about the mounting debts. He refused to listen. His performance of the loyal friend was polished. The regret in his voice sounded almost genuine. The tell. Yet the eyes watched Poirot too carefully, calculating every response. True loyalty does not calculate its words so precisely. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. Monsieur Blake, you dined with Sir Reginald last evening. The brandy was poured in your presence, no? Blake nodded smoothly. Yes, he seemed fine then. A little distracted, perhaps. Contradictions emerged like missed cues in a flawed play. Lady Eleanor insisted Reginald had gone to the library alone after dinner. Derek claimed he heard voices from the library around 11:30. Violet said she had retired early with a headache. Julian maintained he had left Reginald alive and well, smoking a cigar. The players had all entered the stage. But who performed truth, and who performed lies? Poirot adjusted his moustache with precision as the rain continued its steady patter against the windows. The fire in the morning room crackled invitingly, yet a deeper chill of suspicion had settled over Ashcombe Hall. The distant sound of a door closing softly echoed from somewhere in the house. Silk rustled as someone shifted uncomfortably in their chair. "Someone here," Poirot said quietly, "is playing their role too perfectly. Truth does not rehearse, mes amis. Lies flow smooth until the mask slips." The tension rose in the warm room. Crystal chandeliers tinkled overhead with the slightest movement. Champagne had been offered earlier to calm nerves, its icy chill contrasting the hot coffee. The cork's pop still lingered in memory like false celebration. "You watch with Poirot, non? You see how the hands tremble, how the eyes avoid certain truths, how the voices stay too controlled. The careful observer, and you are becoming one, mon ami, will notice these small fractures in the performance. Consider the psychology. What role does each person need to play to protect themselves? The grieving widow, the dutiful son, and the loyal secretary, the shocked business partner. If you were hiding guilt, how would you perform innocence?" The morning room felt smaller now, the elegant Art Deco lines closing in like theatre walls. Fresh flowers scented the air, but their sweetness could not mask the growing scent of fear beneath the cologne and perfume. Chapter 3. The first act to deeper investigation unfolded that afternoon in the hushed library of Ashcombe Hall. The torn photograph lay protected under glass on the small table, its jagged edge sharp and accusing. Poirot arranged a silver pen, notepad, and crystal paperweight with perfect symmetry before studying the scene carefully. The air smelled of old leather, fresh lilies, and faint lingering cigar smoke. Outside, rain pattered steadily against the tall windows framed by heavy velvet curtains. A sharp-eyed maid had discovered a partially burned scrap from the missing half hidden in the fireplace ashes. The fragment showed the edge of an expensive 1920s dress and part of a woman's hand wearing a distinctive ring, matching one Lady Eleanor had worn in old family photographs displayed in the drawing room. "The mask slips," Poirot murmured softly, his green eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Did you catch it, mon ami?" When gently pressed in a private, Lady Eleanor denied any knowledge of the ring or the old image. Her performance of dignified ignorance held, but a faint tremor touched her silk-gloved hands. The first true revelation came during a quiet conversation with Violet Harrington in the warm morning room. Poirot offered her hot coffee, its rich aroma filling the space, till the secretary's composure finally cracked under his gentle but persistent questions. "Sir Reginald had an affair many years ago," Violet whispered, tears forming at last, "before his marriage to Lady Eleanor. The woman in the photograph. She bore him a child. He paid her to disappear, but she threatened to return one day. That photograph was dangerous." Her voice trembled with raw emotion this time. The linen handkerchief grew genuinely damp. The shoulders shook with real pain, not rehearsed sorrow. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, making an expressive gesture with his small hands. "And you, mademoiselle, you typed letters concerning this matter, non? You knew the secret?" Violet nodded, wiping her eyes. "I came here seeking answers. Perhaps even revenge at first. But then I saw him. Old, tired, regretful. I could not hate him any more. The director method, Lady Eleanor, the performance. She weeps when others speak of the affair. The handkerchief dabs at the eyes. The shoulders shake at appropriate moments. The tell. But observe, the tears arrive only on cue when the scandal is mentioned by others. When alone with Poirot, the grief remains drier, too perfectly controlled." The psychology. I am reminded of the Ackroyd affair, where a man performed shocks so convincingly that even I, Hercule Poirot, was momentarily deceived. He had rehearsed in front of mirrors, practiced the widening of the eyes, the dropping of the jaw in perfect timing. But he made one fatal error. He reached for his cigarette case with hands far too steady. A man truly shocked does not possess such steady hands. The body, it knows the truth even when the face lies beautifully. This is what the little grey cells understand, the psychology beneath every performance. In that case, the performer had killed to protect both his inheritance and his hidden debts. The mask of grief was flawless until the small physical betrayals appeared. Here at Ashcombe Hall, perhaps a wife performs widowhood to protect her social position and fortune from an old scandal that could strip her of everything she has built. The truth. Therefore, Lady Eleanor knew far more about the death and the dangerous photograph than she admitted. Her grief is elegant costume, not genuine feeling. You see it now, no? The theatre begins to crumble around her. The rain intensified against the windows, a steady rhythm like distant, mocking applause. Inside, the fire crackled warmly in the grate, filling the room with pleasant wood smoke that mixed with the scent of expensive perfume and strong coffee. Silk rustled as Violet shifted in her chair, her kid gloves now lying forgotten on the polished mahogany table. Poirot drew himself up to his full height, still small but commanding. This first revelation changes the entire production. The past has returned to the stage, and someone fears its spotlight. Reflection. In this elegant theatre of Ashcombe Hall, we witness how humans wear masks not only to deceive others, but to survive their own truths. Lady Eleanor performs the role of dignified widow, because society demands composure from women of her station. To display open relief at the death of a difficult husband would invite scandal and judgment. Greed performs as quiet grief. Pride performs as restrained sorrow. We all step onto smaller stages daily, reciting lines written by expectation, fear of rejection, and the desperate need to maintain our place in the world. Why do we wear these masks so faithfully? Because the naked face feels unbearably vulnerable. Raw emotions, hatred for a controlling spouse, secret joy at sudden freedom, terror of losing wealth and status, threaten the carefully assigned roles: loyal wife, dutiful son, devoted employee. The mask protects us from exposure, yet it also slowly imprisons the true self. I recall another telling case years ago in a quiet Belgian town, where a respected doctor performed the role of grieving husband after his wife's sudden illness. He attended the funeral with perfect tears streaming down his face, comforted the children with wonderfully steady hands. He had even arranged the funeral flowers with artistic sensitivity. The village praised his remarkable strength and devotion. Yet when he believed no one was watching, he hummed a cheerful tune while sorting through his late wife's valuable jewelry. The body betrayed him in subtle ways. A too quick smile when receiving condolences. A failure to flinch at mentions of poison. The doctor had grown tired of his wife's constant demands and had found a younger, more agreeable love. He wore the mask of mourning so convincingly that few suspected anything. But Poirot noticed the discord between the spoken lines and the silent truth of the body. The mask slipped permanently when he counted money too eagerly the very night after the funeral. The universal truth about deception is simple yet profound. No performance remains perfect forever. for the little grey cells always detect the subtle discord between the rehearsed words and the body's honest reactions. Guilt manifests in dry eyes during performed tears, steady hands during supposed shock, and overly smooth alibis during moments that should feel spontaneous and broken. Theatrical wisdom for you, dear listener. Begin to watch those around you with sharper eyes. When someone performs grief too perfectly, without real tears, or loyalty without the slightest doubt, or innocence without natural confusion, pause and ask yourself, what role does this person desperately need to play? The mask always develops cracks under sustained pressure. In the grand theatre of life, truth refuses to rehearse its lines. It simply waits for the spotlight. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. Poirot increased the pressure on the cast the following day. Interviews moved back to the elegant drawing room, where the fire crackled warmly and sent pleasant wood smoke curling toward the high ceiling. Rain continued its steady drumming against the tall windows, a constant backdrop to the growing tension. The air smelled of strong continental coffee, fresh lilies, and the faint trace of expensive perfume. He began with Derek Ashcombe. The young man entered in rough tweed, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from another early walk on the cold terrace. His hands were no longer steady. "You claimed you were in the billiard room until midnight," Poirot said calmly. "Yet a servant heard voices from the library at 11:30. Loud voices, angry voices." Derek's rehearsed lines faltered. "It was nothing important, just another argument about money. Father was always shouting lately." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "And when I mentioned the burnt scrap showing the old ring, your face lost all colour. The hands shook violently. That was not the reaction of an innocent son." Derek sank into a chair, silk cushions sighing beneath him. "I saw the full photograph once as a boy. Father burned most copies, but that one remained hidden. He said the woman was dangerous, and the child could destroy everything." The performance of the dutiful son began to strain visibly. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the chill seeping from the terrace doors. Next came Lady Eleanor. She arrived in fresh black silk that rustled softly, her Worth perfume heavy in the warm room. She gripped a crisp linen napkin tightly. "The cyanide came from the gardener's shed," Poirot stated. "Your access was limited to family members and those who knew the house well. I was in my room all evening," she insisted, but her voice rose too high. The silk gown whispered with sudden, nervous movement. "I had nothing to do with any poison." Poirot smoothed his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "Yet you knew about the old affair and the child for years, madame. You tolerated it to protect your position. Now the photograph threatened to bring the past into the open, and perhaps strip you of your inheritance." Lady Eleanor's mask cracked further. Her hands trembled as she dabbed at eyes that remained suspiciously dry. The rehearsed grief was failing under direct pressure. Julian Blake entered next, his sharp cologne cutting through the coffee aroma. He accepted a glass of icy champagne, the bubbles rising in the crystal flute. His earlier smooth performance now showed clear strain. "You claim to have smoked a cigar on the cold terrace after dinner," Poirot continued. "Yet no ash was found outside, only inside, near the library door. The rain was already falling. How do you explain that, Monsieur Blake?" Blake swirled the champagne too quickly, the liquid nearly spilling. "The rain? Perhaps I stepped back inside for a moment. It proves nothing." His performance of the loyal business partner grew strained. The confident smile no longer reached his eyes. He glanced too often toward the library door, calculating his next lines. Violet Harrington was the last to face the spotlight. She sat twisting her soft kid gloves, sandalwood cologne faint on her skin. Her helpfulness now appeared as overacting. "You offered many details unasked, mademoiselle," Poirot observed. "The exact time you retired, the headache, the letters you typed. Too many details, too perfectly timed. Truth stumbles naturally. Lies flow smooth." Violet's voice broke slightly. "I only wanted to help. I admired him." Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. "Helpfulness can mask other motives. You knew the secret of the child. Perhaps someone else discovered that you knew." False performances exposed themselves in small, telling ways throughout the morning. Lady Eleanor avoided all mention of the ring on the burned scrap. Derek reached too quickly for cigarettes when cornered. Julian's hands shook when the cyanide was mentioned again. Violet offered one detail too many about the brandy being poured. The rain intensified, lashing harder against the windows. Inside, the fire warmth battled the growing chill of suspicion. Crystal chandeliers tinkled overhead with every nervous movement. A door closed softly somewhere in the distance, the sound sharp in the tense silence. Poirot arranged 3 objects symmetrically on the side table: a silver ashtray, a fresh lily, and a crystal glass. Rehearsed lines, they always begin to falter when real pressure is applied. Truth needs no rehearsal. It simply exists. Derek broke further, admitting he had heavy gambling debts that the inheritance would have cleared. Lady Eleanor's composure slipped when reminded that the child's existence could challenge the will. Julian's polished charm cracked when his own shady business dealings with Reginald were hinted at. The script was failing badly now. Alibis contradicted one another like missed cues in a poorly rehearsed play. Silk rustled, leather creaked, and the smell of champagne mixed with hot coffee and a furniture wax. You watch with Poirot, no? See how the confident voices grow higher, how the steady hands now tremble, how the eyes dart away from the truth. The tension rises. Someone will break character very soon. Consider the psychology. What role does each person need so desperately to protect? The grieving widow protecting her status, the son saving himself from ruin, the partner hiding embezzlement. If you were hiding guilt, how would you perform innocence under such spotlight? The elegant drawing room, once a stage of refined weekend pleasure, now felt like a tightening trap. Fresh flowers still scented the air sweetly, but their fragrance could not cover the bitter undercurrent of fear. Chapter 5. The Mask Slips. The major confrontation took place that evening in the library itself, the very stage of the crime. All the suspects were gathered under the soft glow of the crystal chandelier, whose pendants tinkled gently with every nervous movement. The air was thick with the scent of leather bindings, fresh lilies, and the faint trace of Cuban cigar smoke that still lingered. Outside, rain lashed the tall windows framed by heavy velvet curtains. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, yet a deeper chill had settled over the room. Poirot stood before them like a director commanding his cast. He arranged a silver letter opener, a notepad, and a crystal inkwell symmetrically on the small table before speaking. "Mademoiselle Violet," he began quietly, "you knew the woman in the torn photograph far better than you admitted, and did you not?" The secretary's face crumpled instantly. The gentle, fragile mask she had worn so carefully fell away completely. She collapsed into the nearest leather armchair, her modest silk dress pooling around her like spilled water. Genuine, ugly sobs shook her entire body. No crisp linen handkerchief could hide the real tears streaming down her cheeks this time. She was my mother, Violet gasped between sobs. Sir Reginald was my father. He abandoned us when I was small. He paid my mother to disappear and never speak of the child. When the secretary position became available, I took it to get close, to find proof, perhaps even to take revenge. But then I saw him, old, tired, carrying his own regrets. I couldn't hate him any more. I started to love the idea of him as my father. The emotional breakdown was raw and unfiltered. Her shoulders heaved with real pain. The kid gloves lay forgotten on the polished mahogany floor. The performance of the innocent, helpful secretary had vanished entirely. Beneath it lay the true face of a daughter who had searched for connection and found only more heartbreak. Poirot's green eyes softened for a brief moment. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The psychology, it is everything, mon ami. You came seeking revenge, but stayed because blood called to blood. Yet someone else in this house could not allow the past to surface. Someone who feared what your existence would mean for the will and the fortune? The crucial psychological insight hung heavy in the warm room. The murderer had not killed merely to hide an old affair. They had killed to prevent Violet's claim as a legitimate heir. A claim the torn photograph could have proven beyond doubt. The jagged tear was not random. It was a desperate attempt to destroy evidence of parentage. Lady Eleanor watched the scene with her own mask straining badly. Her black silk gown rustled as she gripped the arms of her chair. The dignified widow role was cracking visibly now. Derek sat stunned, his rough tweed suddenly seeming too heavy on his shoulders. He stared at Violet as if seeing her for the first time. Julian Blake's confident posture had collapsed. His sharp cologne no longer masked the faint smell of fear sweat. His hands trembled as he reached for the champagne glass that stood untouched on the side table. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands, drawing himself up to his full height. Observe how the masks fall when truth is forced into the light. Mademoiselle Violette's breakdown is genuine. The tears, the shaking, the raw pain, these cannot be rehearsed so convincingly. But someone else in this room still clings to their performance, someone whose helpfulness or grief or loyalty was only ever a costume. You watch with Poirot, non? See how real emotion looks different from performed grief. The handkerchief is soaked. The voice breaks naturally. The body does not lie when the mask is torn away. Ask yourself, if you carried such a secret, how long could you perform innocence before the weight became too heavy? The tension in the library rose sharply. The fire crackled louder, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. The rain on the windows sounded like urgent applause, demanding the next act. A silk rustled as Lady Eleanor shifted uncomfortably. A grandfather clock chimed softly from the hall, marking the hour with solemn finality. Violet lifted her tear-streaked face. I didn't kill him. I wanted answers, not his death. I wanted him to acknowledge me, just once. Poirot nodded. Mais oui. Your mask has fallen, and beneath it we see truth at last. But the murderer's mask still holds. For now, the spotlight grows brighter. The final act approaches. Lady Eleanor's voice came out strained. This is ridiculous. A secretary claiming to be his daughter. Preposterous theatre. But her protest sounded hollow. The performance was failing. Derek looked between Violet and his mother, confusion and dawning understanding mixing on his face. Julian remained silent, his earlier smooth charm completely shattered. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged at last. Beneath the gentle secretary lay a daughter seeking her father. Beneath the dignified widow lay fear of losing everything. Beneath the loyal partner, who knows what still hides? The chandelier light caught the jagged edge of the torn photograph, making it gleam accusingly. The smell of hot coffee mixed with the icy chill of untouched champagne. Leather creaked as someone gripped their chair too tightly. The revelation had changed the entire production. One mask had fallen completely, revealing raw human pain. Others were cracking badly, their rehearsed lines no longer convincing. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. Past secrets poured forth like actors removing their makeup in the dim backstage light. The library, once the scene of death, now served as the place where hidden truths were dragged into the open. The torn photograph lay under glass, its jagged edge still sharp under the soft glow of the crystal chandelier. The air carried the mingled scents of old leather, fresh hothouse lilies, lingering cigar smoke, and the rich aroma of strong continental coffee that Poirot had ordered brought in. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly in a velvet-upholstered chair, her black silk gown rustling with every tense breath. She no longer bothered with the crisp linen handkerchief. "Yes, I knew about the affair," she admitted at last, her voice low and bitter. "Reginald told me years ago. The woman was beautiful. It's from a good family that fell on hard times. He paid her generously to vanish with the child. I tolerated it to keep my position, my home, my status. A wife learns to wear the mask of understanding." Derek leaned forward, his rough tweed jacket creaking. His hands no longer trembled from performance, but from genuine shock. "I had debts, gambling debts that grew worse every month. Father knew. He promised the inheritance would save me, but only if the business recovered. When I heard voices that night from the library, I thought it was another row about money. I never imagined." Julian Blake's polished exterior had cracked wide open. His sharp cologne could not hide the faint smell of fear sweat. "Reginald and I were partners for 15 years, but he grew careless. I helped him with certain arrangements, risky investments. Some money disappeared into accounts only I controlled. The old scandal threatened to expose everything. If the child appeared and claimed a share, the will would be challenged. My own dealings would come to light." Violet Harrington, her face still blotched from earlier tears, sat quietly now. Her modest silk dress seemed simpler, more honest. Sandalwood lingered faintly on her skin. "I never told anyone who I really was. I only wanted to know him. But someone must have discovered my connection, perhaps through old letters I typed." The backstage of relationships at Ashcombe Hall was revealed in all its ugliness. Lady Eleanor's long-simmering resentment dressed as loyalty. Derek's desperation masked as dutiful concern. Julian's greed performing as solid business partnership. Violet's quiet search for belonging, hidden behind helpful efficiency. Hidden connections bound them tighter than blood or affection ever could. Poirot arranged a silver ashtray, fresh lily, and crystal glass with precise symmetry on the small table. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully as the rain continued its relentless patter against the windows. The fire crackled warmly, sending wood smoke curling upward, while the chill from the terrace doors pressed in. Reflection. Behind the elegant velvet curtains of Ashcombe Hall, motives danced in shadow, far more complex than simple greed or jealousy. We see how hidden connections can bind people more tightly than love or loyalty ever does. Lady Eleanor's silent complicity in an old affair, Julian's blackmailing knowledge of shady deals, Derek's quiet desperation for money, Asia and Violet's secret blood tie, all performed as normal family life and respectable business partnership. Humans hide their true motives, because revelation would destroy the roles we cherish most. The respected businessman, the dignified lady of the house, the promising son, the devoted secretary. Greed masks itself as ambition. Resentment wears the costume of patience. Fear performs as calm cooperation. The psychology is as old as humanity itself, the terror that if the true self is seen clearly, we will be rejected, disinherited, cast out, or destroyed. I recall the famous case aboard the luxury liner Karnak on the Nile, where every passenger performed a sophisticated role in a grand conspiracy of vengeance. Each wore the mask of the innocent traveller, the devoted husband grieving his wife, the charming young woman on holiday, but the quiet doctor, the grieving widow. They dined together, played cards, exchanged polite conversation under the stars. Yet backstage, one woman had orchestrated murder to reclaim a stolen love and fortune. She performed innocence so brilliantly that even her fellow passengers offered her comfort and sympathy. But Poirot noticed how she avoided speaking the victim's name in private moments, how her hands shook only when she believed no one watched, how her smile froze for a fraction too long. The body betrayed the performance despite the flawless rehearsal. She had practiced her grief in the mirror of her cabin, yet forgot that genuine sorrow does not rehearse its lines or calculate its tears. The universal truth remains. Every secret kept backstage eventually creates a motive powerful enough for murder. Love can perform as cold indifference. Hate can dress itself as steadfast loyalty. Helpfulness can mask cold calculation. But the curtain always parts in the end. No performance survives the spotlight of truth forever. Theatrical wisdom for you, dear listener. Look carefully behind the performances of those closest to you. The overly helpful friend who asks too many questions. The grieving relative whose tears arrive exactly on cue. The loyal partner who watches everyone a little too closely. Ask yourself, what motive hides behind this perfect role? What fear drives the mask? Behind every curtain, a secret waits. Behind every secret, a motive strong enough to kill. The rain eased slightly, leaving only a soft patter against the glass. Inside the library, the fire warmth battled the lingering chill. Crystal chandeliers tinkled overhead as someone shifted in their chair. The smell of leather and fresh flowers mixed with the bitter undercurrent of exposed truth. Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The cast was fully assembled in the drawing room of Ashcombe Hall for the final performance. Crystal chandeliers tinkled softly overhead with every slight movement. The fire crackled warmly in the grate, sending wood smoke curling upward to mix with the scents of fresh lilies, strong continental coffee, and lingering expensive perfume. Outside, rain lashed the tall windows framed by heavy velvet curtains, while the chill night air pressed against the glass. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed solemnly, marking the hour. Hercule Poirot stood before them like a director on opening night, small but commanding. He drew himself up to his full height and arranged 3 small objects symmetrically on the side table, a silver cigarette case, a crystal ashtray, and a fresh lily, before addressing the gathered suspects. Mesdames et messieurs, you have each performed for Poirot, some truthfully, some not. Let us review the performances, shall we? He turned first to Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, who sat rigidly in black silk, her worth perfume heavy in the warm room. Lady Eleanor, you played the grieving widow beautifully. The handkerchief dabbing at the eyes, the shoulders shaking at the right moments, the perfectly modulated voice. But the grief, it was costume, not feeling. Your eyes remained dry when alone. You knew about the old affair and the child for years. You tolerated it to protect your position and fortune. Or when the torn photograph appeared, you feared it would bring the past into the light and strip you of everything. Your performance of dignified sorrow was technically perfect, too perfect. Lady Eleanor's hands tightened on her linen napkin. The silk of her gown rustled as she shifted uncomfortably. Poirot continued, tilting his egg-shaped head. Derek, you performed the loyal but troubled son with skill. The trembling hands, the admissions about money troubles, the shocked expression. But loyalty does not argue heatedly with a father hours before his death, then lie about the exact time. Your gambling debts made you desperate for the inheritance. You saw the full photograph as a boy and knew its danger. Derek looked down at the polished parquet floor, his rough tweed jacket suddenly seeming too heavy. Violet, your role as the innocent secretary slipped when the truth emerged. You are the hidden daughter, seeking connection rather than revenge in the end. Your emotional breakdown in the library was genuine. The soaked handkerchief, the raw sobs, the shaking shoulders. You did not kill your father. Your mask fell completely, revealing the true face beneath. Violet sat quietly, her modest silk dress simple and honest now, the faint sandalwood cologne still clinging to her skin. And so we come to our leading performer. Poirot turned to Julian Blake, whose confident posture had completely collapsed. His sharp, masculine cologne could not hide the fear sweat. Julian Blake, you gave the most convincing performance of all. The shocked business partner, the helpful friend offering champagne and condolences, the smooth regret, magnifique. But you made one fatal error. One small moment when the mask slipped completely. When I mentioned the cyanide taken from the gardener's shed, your hand moved instinctively toward your pocket, where you had hidden the remaining poison, thinking no one watched. A guilty man reaches for evidence when cornered. The body knows, even when the mind lies. You killed Sir Reginald to silence the scandal that would expose your own embezzlement tied to the old affair. The torn photograph was both your warning and your mistake. You tore it in haste after the murder, burned the half showing the distinctive ring you recognized as proof of the child's existence. The child whose claim would challenge the will and reveal your thefts. Julian's face drained of all color. His rehearsed lines failed him entirely. He half rose from his chair, eyes wild. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands, his green eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The performance is over. The curtain falls. The truth, she takes her bow at last. Julian lunged desperately toward the door, but two waiting constables stepped forward and seized him. His mask had shattered completely. The smooth businessman was gone, replaced by a desperate man stripped of all pretense. The cast has performed, Poirot continued calmly. Lady Eleanor played grief to protect her status. Derek played loyalty to hide his debts. Violet played innocence while searching for her father. But Julian Blake played the role of loyal partner while planning murder to cover his crimes. The psychology, it reveals everything. Greed performed as concern, fear performed as cooperation, a hate performed as friendship. The room fell silent except for the crackling fire and the rain on the windows. Silk rustled as Lady Eleanor released a long, shaky breath. Derek stared at Julian in disbelief. Violet watched with quiet sorrow. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "You see it now, no? Every actor eventually forgets their lines. The body betrays what the face tries to hide. Steady hands during shock, dry eyes during tears, instinctive movements toward hidden evidence. These are the tells that truth demands." He turned to the entire cast. The theatre of crime has one truth. No performance survives the spotlight forever. The masks have been removed. Only truth remains. Julian was led away, his once sleek figure now slumped between the officers. No more smooth words, no more calculated charm, since the leading performer had been exposed in the harsh glare of truth. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The aftermath unfolded slowly in the now quiet halls of Ashcombe Hall, like the final bows after the house lights have risen. Julian Blake had been taken away by the police into the chill night air. His once sleek figure, so confident in dinner clothes, now appeared broken as he was led through the grand entrance. The sound of car doors closing echoed sharply from the driveway, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. Inside, the drawing room felt strangely empty, the stage abandoned after the final act. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe sat motionless in her velvet chair, her black silk gown suddenly seeming too heavy, too formal for the simple truth that remained. The expensive Worth perfume still clung to her, but her face had lost its carefully composed mask. No more dabbing with the crisp linen handkerchief. No more modulated voice of dignified grief. She stared into the crackling fire, the warm glow illuminating lines of exhaustion and quiet relief. "All these years," she whispered, "I performed the perfect wife, tolerated the secrets, protected the name, and for what?" Her transformation was stark. The elegant widow who had commanded the room with poise was gone. In her place sat a woman stripped of pretense, forced to face the reality that her marriage had been built on tolerated lies and financial fear. The silk rustled softly as she rose and moved to the tall windows, looking out at the cold terrace where frost still clung to the stone. Derek Ashcombe stood near the polished mahogany sideboard, his rough tweed jacket rumpled. He accepted a cup of hot coffee from the maid, the rich aroma rising between his hands, but he barely sipped it. The trembling that had once been part of his performance had vanished, replaced by genuine shock and a dawning sense of freedom. "I thought the inheritance would save me from my debts," he admitted quietly to Poirot. "I played the dutiful son, argued with father, lied about the time, all while fearing the worst. Now the truth is out. The debts remain, but at least the suspicion is gone." His role as the troubled heir had been replaced by something quieter. A young man confronting his own weaknesses without the weight of murder hanging over him. The fire warmth reflected in his eyes as he looked toward his mother, a new understanding passing between them. No more rehearsed lines about business troubles, only honest exhaustion. Violet Harrington sat apart from the others, her modest silk dress simple and unadorned. The kid gloves lay folded neatly in her lap. Her face, still marked by earlier tears, now held a strange calm. Sandalwood lingered faintly on her skin, a reminder of her days as the helpful secretary. "I never wanted his death," she said softly. "I only wanted him to see me, to acknowledge the photograph, the past. Now I know he was my father, and the law will decide what that means for the will." Her transformation was perhaps the most profound. The mask of the innocent secretary had fallen completely in the library, revealing the daughter beneath. No longer performing helpfulness or fragility, she sat with quiet dignity, a woman who had found painful truth instead of revenge. The chandelier light caught her features gently, softening the raw emotion that had broken through earlier. Inspector Japp supervised the final details with his usual gruff efficiency. Statements were taken once more, the torn photograph carefully packaged as evidence. The jagged half and the burned scrap would be pieced together symbolically, the full image of young Reginald and Violet's mother now serving as proof rather than threat. The library door remained closed, the scene of the crime no longer a stage for performance, but a room waiting to be cleansed of its ghosts. Poirot moved among them with small, precise steps. He adjusted his moustache with precision and made an expressive gesture with his small hands. "The curtain call has come, mes amis. No more roles to play. Lady Eleanor, your grief was cost you. Now you may feel what you truly feel. Derek, your loyalty hid desperation. Now you may face your debts honestly. Violet, your search for connection is no longer hidden. The theatre empties and justice begins its slow work." The reactions varied like final bows from different actors. Lady Eleanor gave a small, weary nod, her shoulders no longer shaking for effect. Derek offered a tentative hand to Violet, acknowledging the half-sister he had never known. She accepted it with quiet grace, the silk of her dress whispering as she stood. No applause filled the room, only the soft tinkle of crystal, the crackling fire, and the distant sound of a door closing as police completed their work. The elegant Art Deco setting, once vibrant with weekend guests and refined performances, now felt subdued. Fresh flowers still scented the air, but their sweetness mixed with the bitter aftertaste of exposed secrets. The grandfather clock chimed again, its tones solemn rather than celebratory. Champagne remained untouched in its bucket, the icy chill no longer needed to calm nerves. "You watch with Poirot, no? See how the masks once so carefully worn have been stripped away. The widow no longer performs sorrow. The son no longer trembles with rehearsed fear. The daughter no longer hides behind helpfulness. Each character stands revealed, transformed by the spotlight of truth." Justice had begun its machinery. Julian Blake would face trial, his convincing performances useless before a court that now saw only the evidence and the psychological tales Poirot had uncovered, and the family would reorganize itself around the new reality. A will to be contested, a business to be salvaged honestly, a hidden heir to be recognized. No applause sounded for this performance. Only the quiet footsteps on parquet floors, the rustle of silk, and the steady rain outside marked the end. The theatre of Ashcombe Hall had delivered its final scene. No applause for this performance, only justice. Chapter 9. After the show months had passed since the final curtain fell on the tragedy at Ashcombe Hall, the grand country house, once a glittering stage for weekend performances of wealth and family harmony, had transformed into a quieter, more honest place. The Art Deco elegance remained. Polished mahogany still gleamed under crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains framed the tall windows, but the air felt lighter, for free from the heavy scent of rehearsed lies and hidden fear. Fresh hothouse lilies continued to grace the rooms, their sweet fragrance mixing now with the clean smell of furniture wax and strong continental coffee. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe had retired to a smaller but still graceful London townhouse. Her black silk gowns had been replaced by simpler day dresses, the expensive Worth perfume worn more sparingly. The mask of the dignified widow had been set aside permanently. In its place was a woman learning to live without the weight of old secrets and financial dependence. She visited Ashcombe Hall occasionally, walking the cold terrace with a straighter back, no longer performing grief or composure for an audience. "I spent years playing the perfect wife," she confided during one visit. "Now I am simply Eleanor. It is strange, but freeing." Her transformation was deep. Pride that once performed as elegant sorrow had softened into quiet acceptance. She no longer gripped linen napkins tightly or avoided mention of the past. The torn photograph, now carefully restored and framed, hung in the library as a reminder rather than a threat. Derek Ashcombe had taken firm control of the family business. His rough tweed jackets were still worn for country weekends, but his demeanour had changed. The trembling hands and desperate excuses about gambling debts had vanished. He worked with new integrity, paying off his obligations honestly instead of waiting for an inheritance to rescue him. The role of the troubled son had been replaced by that of a responsible man confronting his flaws. During a weekend visit, he sat with Violet in the warm drawing room, the fire crackling pleasantly. "I almost lost everything because I performed loyalty while hiding my weaknesses," he said. "Father's death forced me to stop acting. The business is smaller now, but it is clean." Violet Harrington, now legally recognized as Violet Ashcombe, had chosen to make Ashcombe Hall her home. Her modest silk dresses had given way to more confident styles, though she kept the faint sandalwood touch that had always been hers. The kid gloves were rarely worn these days. She had restored parts of the house with care, turning the library from a crime scene into a peaceful reading room where the restored photograph stood as a symbol of truth accepted. Her emotional breakdown had led to genuine healing. No longer performing the helpful secretary, she embraced her role as daughter and heir with quiet warmth. I came seeking revenge and found a father instead," she told Poirot during his farewell visit. "The pain was real, but so is the peace now." The setting itself had undergone its own transformation. The elegant stage of secrets and weekend performances had become a peaceful family home. The cold terrace where Julian once claimed to smoke his cigar was now a place for quiet reflection. The drawing room, once filled with strained alibis and tinkling crystal, hosted honest conversations around the fire. Even the grandfather clock seemed to chime with a gentler tone. Poirot had returned one final time to see the changes. He moved through the rooms with small, precise steps, arranging a silver ashtray and fresh lilies symmetrically on a side table out of habit. His green eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction as he observed the transformations. "Now the theatre has emptied," he said softly, "but the lessons remain. You see, mon ami, each actor has stepped out of their role at last." Lady Eleanor no longer performed widowhood. Derek no longer performed loyalty to hide desperation. Violet no longer performed innocence while hiding her blood tie. The murderer's convincing performance of helpful partnership had ended in a prison cell, his mask shattered forever. You who followed this drama with Poirot, you have changed too. From a passive viewer at the opening curtain, you became an active observer, spotting the dry eyes, the steady hands, the rehearsed lines that faltered. You learned to watch for the mask slips, to ask why someone needs to play a certain role so desperately. That is the true gift of this theatre of crime. The rain had long since stopped. Sunlight now filtered through the tall windows, warming the polished parquet floors and making the crystal chandeliers sparkle without the early attention. The smell of wood smoke from the fire mixed pleasantly with fresh flowers and hot coffee. Silk no longer rustled with nervous movement, only with natural grace. Futures had begun to take shape. Lady Eleanor found new friendships unburdened by old scandals. Derek married a sensible woman who valued honesty over performance. Violet supported her mother in her later years and opened parts of Ashcombe Hall for quiet retreats, ensuring the house served truth rather than secrets. Poirot stood on the terrace one last time, the chill air refreshing after the warm rooms. He smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve and touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The stage is reset for new lives. The old performances are over. Justice has taken its bow, and the actors have removed their costumes at last. The theatre of Ashcombe Hall had delivered its final lesson. Masks had been discarded. Truth had remained. The theatre emptied. The lessons remained. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. Hercule Poirot sat comfortably in his London apartment, the late afternoon light filtering softly through the curtains. A steaming cup of tisane rested on the small table beside him, its herbal aroma blending with the faint scent of strong continental coffee he had finished earlier, and the pleasant smell of fresh furniture wax on the polished surfaces. The room was arranged with perfect symmetry. Books aligned, cushions plumped, a single fresh lily in a crystal vase catching the light. Outside, ungentle London rain pattered against the windows. A familiar and soothing curtain closing on another completed drama. News of the characters from Ashcombe Hall had reached him over the months. Lady Eleanor had settled into her smaller townhouse with quiet dignity, no longer performing the role of grieving widow, but living as a woman finally free from old secrets. Derek had stabilized the family business with honest effort, his gambling debts cleared through hard work rather than inheritance. He had married sensibly and visited his half-sister regularly. Violet Ashcombe had made the Hall her home, restoring it as a place of honesty. She supported her mother and had turned the once troubled estate into a peaceful retreat. Julian Blake remained in prison, his convincing performances of loyalty and shock powerless before the truth. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully and leaned back, his green eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he reviewed the entire performance. Why do people perform? Rather than simply reveal the truth, because performance feels safer than exposure. The raw self, greedy, frightened, resentful, or desperately hopeful, is terrifying to show to the world. Society writes the scripts we feel compelled to follow. The perfect wife, the dutiful son, the loyal partner, the helpful employee. To step out of character risks rejection, poverty, scandal, or violence. So we rehearse our lines in private. We wear masks of grief when we feel relief, masks of loyalty when resentment simmers, masks of innocence when we hide dark knowledge. Yet the body, that honest actor who cannot be fully trained, always forgets its lines eventually. It dry eyes during performed tears, steady hands during supposed shock, instinctive reaches toward hidden evidence. These small betrayals are what the little grey cells detect so reliably. The masks society demands are particularly heavy in elegant circles like Ashcombe Hall. In the refined world of 1930s, country houses and business empires, one must appear controlled, refined, and above scandal. Women especially are expected to perform composure while their private worlds crumble. Men must perform strength, even as fear gnaws at them. These masks do not merely hide, they slowly choke genuine emotion until it erupts as desperate action, sometimes even murder. Guilt always betrays the actor in the end. It manifests in overacting, offering too many unnecessary details, or performing shock too smoothly, or in tiny physical rebellions the mind cannot control. A glance away at the wrong moment, a tremor suppressed too late, a hand moving instinctively toward hidden poison. In this case, Julian Blake's mask slipped when he reached for the remaining cyanide in his pocket. The body knew what the face tried to deny. I compare this drama to the famous affair on the Orient Express, where a group of passengers created an elaborate performance of innocence. Each wore the mask of the ordinary traveller, grieving, charming, quiet, or helpful. They dined together, exchanged pleasantries, and maintained their roles with remarkable discipline. Yet beneath the surface, they had coordinated to deliver justice for a terrible crime. Poirot peeled away those masks one by one, revealing the coordinated performance and the raw motives driving it. In both cases, truth triumphed because every performance requires constant energy and perfect memory. Truth, by contrast, is robust. It aligns naturally with physical reality and does not need props or constant rehearsal. The psychology of revelation is a beautiful thing to observe. When the spotlight of truth shines directly, the actor often freezes. The carefully maintained mask cannot hold against honest confrontation. In that moment, even the guilty sometimes feel a strange relief as the burden of performance finally lifts. Justice, though painful, brings its own peace because the exhausting theatre ends. Why does truth ultimately triumph over performance? Because deception is fragile. It depends on consistent memory, on the absence of careful observers, and on the hope that no one will notice the small discords. Truth is far stronger. It matches the evidence of the body and the little inconsistencies that cannot be controlled forever. Order and method, combined with a deep understanding of human psychology, will always expose the lie in the end. You, dear listener, have travelled this theatre with Poirot from the moment the curtain rose. You watched the opening performances, noted the dry handkerchiefs and steady hands, spotted the missed cues and faltering alibis. You asked yourself why each person needed to play their particular role so desperately. You have become the careful observer who sees behind the masks. That is the greatest reward of these mysteries, not merely identifying the murderer, but learning to recognize the performances in your own life. And the psychology of these cases teaches both suspicion and compassion. Behind every unconvincing performance of grief may lie genuine pain mixed with secret relief. Behind outward loyalty may hide long-simmering resentment. We wear masks because we are human, flawed, frightened, and hopeful. But when we are forced to remove them, even in pain and embarrassment, we often find unexpected connection and freedom. In the end, the theatre of crime at Ashcombe Hall showed us that every actor eventually forgets their lines. The torn photograph was not merely a clue, it was a symbol. A piece of the past ripped away in panic, only to be pieced together again by truth. The murderer tore it to destroy evidence, but in doing so created the very prop that helped expose him. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis. Poirot watches always, and the curtain falls here, but the grand stage of life continues its performances. Watch carefully. The masks are everywhere. In drawing rooms, in business meetings, in quiet conversations. And truth, she waits patiently for her bow, knowing that no rehearsal can defeat her forever. The rain outside softened to a gentle patter. Poirot took a sip of tisane, its warmth comforting. He arranged the cup and saucer with precise symmetry, and allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The performance was over. Only truth remained, until the next theatre of crime, mes amis. Poirot watches always.